U.S. and China tensions continue to escalate. President Trump says he's unsure if a meeting will happen with President Xi on his trip to Asia. Join us now, United States Trade Representative Ambassador Jamieson Greer. It's been on, it's been off, it's been on again, off again. Can you fill us in, Mr. Ambassador? Where do we stand right now with the president and his meeting with President Xi?
Well, there's a spot for it on the schedule if it happens. Obviously, it's a mutual decision as to whether President Xi and President Trump meet together. Obviously, I think it makes sense to talk, especially at a time where there are a lot of measures in place by the Chinese. But we'll see.
Is Secretary Bessett's involved at a slightly lower level, too? Is that coming Friday?
So Secretary Bessett and I, we're leaving today, actually, to go to Malaysia, and we'll meet with the Chinese on the front end of this whole swing to try to see if there's room to move forward on some of these really difficult issues that have come up due to some new Chinese measures on rare earths.
Can you be, is it possible for you to tell us exactly in your view, what happened since the original framework of that deal was announced? And there's conjecture that we did something that made them mad about some export controls that we had, and that's what caused the shot across the bow with the rare earth materials, which is, I mean, that was a pretty significant move on China's part. They knew exactly what they were doing and how, I don't know what's the word for it. I mean, that was an aggressive move.
It was incredibly aggressive. It was totally disproportional to anything that the U.S., the EU, or Canada, or anybody did. Because remember, these are global measures that the Chinese have put in place to purport to control the movement or export of any item containing certain rare earths from one country to another, right? Even if China is not one of the parties in the agreement. So in Geneva, we had an agreement where they would limit their rare earth export controls, they'd keep their retaliatory tariffs down, and we would suspend a good portion of our tariffs on the reciprocal tariff. And so we've kept our part. We kept that tariff low, and we had very cordial and constructive discussions over the summer. And then again, a couple of weeks ago, the Chinese decided they were just going to go ahead and expand those controls on rare earths again, not on just us, but on the whole world. And now you hear a lot of narratives from the Chinese side of their surrogates saying, well, the Americans have put a lot of controls on us over the past few years, or they put out a new rule that would, to avoid evasion of U.S. export controls that they didn't like, or their fees on ships. So they're trying out a lot of different narratives when the reality is they just want to exert economic control on the world. They started in April with the rare earth magnets. They're using anything else that has happened as a pretext. The reality is we made a promise in May to keep our reciprocal tariff on them at 10%. We kept that promise, and they have not kept theirs.
The president also over the weekend allayed some fears that this is, going back in time and things have happened since then. But he said, look, we're going to be fine. I don't want to destroy China. And so we see, I don't know whether it's mixed signals or part of the negotiation, but do you feel that there is a mutually beneficial point where the two countries will eventually, where they will arrive and, everything's going to be fine? Do you believe that, Mr. Ambassador?
Well, let me put it this way. There notionally is a good landing zone for the United States and China, where we trade in a way that's more balanced, and we're trading in non-sensitive goods, and where we have a constructive relationship, and we probably have to actively manage that trading relationship. The trading relationship over the past 20 years with them has very much been China has broad and wide access to the U.S. market, and the U.S. has had quite limited access to the Chinese market. Of course they like that deal. They like that setup. We can't live that way anymore, so we need an alternative path. The question is, do the Chinese accept this? Do the Chinese want to do it? The U.S. has always been quite open to the Chinese, and it's really been driven by Chinese policies that exclude U.S. companies and drive overcapacity and overproduction in China. None of that works for the United States.
Ambassador, we have looked at the export of semiconductors, of the best semiconductor chips, as something we don't want to do in terms of allowing China to use them in their military-grade weapons. They may potentially look at rare earths the same way. Is that part of the dialogue, that we would extend additional semiconductor chips to them in order to get access to rare earth minerals?
So the United States and almost all developed countries have had export controls and used them for decades to control the most critical products and manufactured goods. In fact, but it's usually a small fraction. So the United States controls the highest end goods to China and other countries as well. But the vast majority of semiconductors and the related supply chain are allowed for export, or they can be licensed. What the Chinese have done is they have licensed not some super high-tech leading edge thing. What they've done is they have licensed basic inputs, rare earths. They say rare. It's not that they're rare as much as they're just all processed in China. The rare earth technology is something that the United States invented and pioneered in the 60s. So this is more like a basic input. It would be as if the United States indiscriminately and broadly embargoed, fertilizer to China or something like that. I mean, this is something that they don't even compare. What the Chinese have done is broad, it's indiscriminate, while the U.S. and other countries, when they do export controls, they're very, very specific, targeted.
Right. Ambassador, I have a philosophical question just about chips and chip speeds and all of that as you think about China. I understand the national security question, but there's this flip side of the argument which Jensen Huang of NVIDIA and others have made about sort of creating a platform and sort of trying to own that platform globally, and that unto itself could create more national security. And I'm curious where you land between those two ideas.
Sure. Well, first of all, keep in mind that any company, even a good American company, super competitive, important company like NVIDIA or others, they all have their own economic interests they're doing too, right? And our laws and regulations, they don't always impose on these companies to take into account the national security. So our job as policymakers is to ensure that national security is recognized. I mean, what these companies are saying, that we want to be competitive 100%. We would love for the world to really be using U.S. products. However, we don't want them to be using them to become more competitive and get a technological edge over the United States. I mean, that's our great, our hard power comes from having the technological edge. And if we cede that to other countries, that becomes problematic. But I think that's why we have processes in the U.S. government, interagency processes to examine these new technologies as they develop to determine what should be sold, what should be licensed, what shouldn't be. Is there foreign availability? Like, we don't want to control something that a country can just get from somebody else, or some kind of technology that's broadly available. It doesn't make sense to control that. But that's why there has to be almost a technology-specific analysis in the U.S. government with industry input about what makes sense to control and what makes sense to sell.